Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for this Alice Advocacy in Action webinar to recap Connecticut's 2025 legislative session. I'm Lisa Tepper Bates from United Way of Connecticut, and whether you're a longtime advocate, a direct service provider, or joining us for the first time, thank you for making the time to be here and to work with us to understand the impact of public policy on the lives of ALICE families across our state. As you probably know, ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. And these are families who are working every day at the jobs available to them, sometimes at multiple jobs, and nonetheless, barely making ends meet or, in fact, falling behind in the cost of living in our state. They're your neighbors and your coworkers. They may drive your kids to school on the bus. They may check you out when you buy your groceries. And they're community leaders. In fact, 4 out of every 10 households in our state are in this Alice category, trying to make basic needs and make those budgets stretch as far as they can to keep a roof over their kids' heads, groceries on the table, light and heat on in the winter. And of course, in this hot weather, hopefully keep the house cool. So we know that these Alice families live in every zip code across our state, and we know that you know who they are. And we know that they're struggling. And so that's why we're here together with you to talk about Alice families and the advocacy that we've engaged in this past session to try and help make adjustments in public policy to better support these households. The 2025 legislative session included some real wins, and we want to celebrate those. But we know that there are also a number of urgent needs left unmet. And so today, what we're going to do together with you is to walk through our advocacy agenda and talk with you about how we fared this past year, what we achieved, what we learned, and what comes next. And our terrific director of advocacy, Daniel, will take over the reins for that. And then what we're going to do is actually widen the lens to talk with a terrific panel of guests about broader state and federal policies and talk about how those are impacting Alice families and what's potentially on the horizon. So before we jump into that terrific agenda, we want to ground today's conversation in a quick recap video to highlight some of the most significant moments from this past session. So let's take a look at that.
Since 2019, Connecticut has seen a 13% increase in the number of Alice households in our state. That's another 65,000 families. That's the highest number we've ever recorded. 50% of the most common jobs in Connecticut pay $20 per hour or less. Let me put that into perspective. A single parent in Connecticut needs to make $35 per hour to buy just the basics. That's no extras, no savings.
This sign here shows you that we're getting worse, not better. This is why this session, we really need to come out and we really need to show a force with our legislators to make sure that we shift the monies that are necessary to take care of the families that are in need.
How essential it is to target our tax relief for families with a permanent refundable child tax credit. But the quickest way to make a difference of the bottom line for families is to make sure they have that money back in their pockets to spend on what they need to do for their families.
My name is Barbara Channels, and I am now a stay-at-home mom, recently retired. I raise my grandson, who is 10 years old. His name is Jack. My husband and I have had him since he was born. We adopted him when he was 2 years old. Some of the challenges, I would say, are financial.
The school-sponsored band requiring an instrument, after-school practice pickups, the birthday party invites from classmates, presents for them, and special outings with those friends all add up. Our children depend on us to provide and be able to provide for their growth, education, and well-being.
Thank you for the opportunity to share my story and highlight the profound impact of 211. My journey with this critical resource began during one of the most challenging periods of my life, losing both of my parents. Their passing felt like a tornado. Leaving me overwhelmed with grief, lost and alone. I searched everywhere for help, but no matter where I turned, I couldn't find the support I needed. When I called 211, everything started to change. Hardship can strike anyone at any time. I never imagined I would be in this position, but 211 was there when I needed it most.
And so many times my office will get a call and saying they're having problem with heat assistance or need a food pantry. And they're not even aware to call 211 for that resource. And they are the conduit to all of the other amazing services that are out there that could help our residents. So it's so important that we support them. They're operating on the same budget since 2009. I couldn't operate on the same budget from 2009. They're having a very hard time being able to have enough people in that call center to answer the phone.
In some ways, it seems like the focus of 2025 in this session and our budget that we're working on in the biennium is to focus on children, right? Is to focus on families with children. And so first I want to commend the governor for his proposed budget, which made a huge investment in childcare, for example. And we're going to work through that idea, and Representative Farrar and Representative Walker and others, we're going to continue to look at that and what that may mean. But I think what you can see from the executive and the legislative branch, and we have bipartisan support here today, is people feel more strongly than ever that the state needs to do more to help our families. And it's not just child care, as the Senate President alluded to, it is also things like the child tax credit.
Thank you, Daniel. And those stories, I think, always motivate me in this work. These are the people that we are working to help. These are the people whose lives we would like to see be a little bit less stressful while they try and keep the basics covered with their budget. I hope that motivates you too. And now I'm going to turn it over to Daniel to talk about this past session. Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, Lisa. And just a quick little housekeeping note, we are going to record this webinar, and so we hope you pass it along to folks in your network who maybe couldn't be here today, but would benefit from learning about the progress we've made so far and what's ahead. We do have the Q&A open. Sorry, I goofed on whether the chat was open or not, but Q&A is open, and we really do want to hear your questions. Anytime you've got them, just drop them in there, and we'll try to answer them, and we'll also leave time for the end for more questions. But we're just going to jump right into it. There's so much to cover. I want to cover our first priority first that we had covered as Connecticut United Ways, which is 211. And let me just, there you go. So please welcome Cheryl Hardgrave to help us get into this topic. As a lot of folks know, 211 is a number you can call anytime you need help, 24/7, totally confidentially. And Cheryl, our policy priority this year was focused specifically on the information and referral services, which is part of where you work. So can you start by explaining what all of that means?
Absolutely. So when someone calls in or uses our chat feature to get any information through 211, they're connected to a highly trained contact specialist who listens, does extreme assessment, and then try to get them connected to any utilized services that might be right for them. That's housing, that's childcare, mental health services, utility health. Those are all the things that we are connecting people to through the assessment. So we are patching people through, we're giving them a full list of assessments. There's a variety of ways that people like to maintain or maintain the information and be able to get to those services that they need from one point to another. Now, we do have 40,000 resources in our database, and we utilize them through the assessment so that the caller will be able to have everything that they need.
That's great. We should probably plug the fact that you could also go to 211ct.org anytime and access any of those 40,000 and more resources and benefits. So clearly, and we're probably in a circle here of folks who are very supportive of strengthening 211. But as Senator Ciccarella said at the end of that video there, this particular service has been flat funded since 2010, and we didn't secure any additional funding in the budget this year. So explain to me, Cheryl, how you would think about an Alice family's impact on that sort of continual flat funding of the 211 services for those basic needs.
It's been a huge impact. We've had to, unfortunately, strategically kind of roll back and reduce some of our staffing over time because of that. The quality of the work hasn't faltered, but the amount of people that we can take care of at a time has. So for Alice family who may have only a 15-minute break at a time, may not be overly tech savvy, may have time constraints, right? Even with trying to utilize technology themselves or don't even know where to start, they don't have the time to wait for us to be able to get to them. So if you're waiting too long, you think that flat out no one can help you or wants to. So for those families, the quality of the assistance and the system could be very overwhelming. They miss out on tons of benefits that they might qualify for because they don't know that they exist. So, and that's why we exist, right? To connect those dots.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I know you're doing that every day, even with the current level of resourcing. So, give us a little bit of a takeaway as far as what would be helpful for everybody here to know so that when we start getting organized again to ask for more resources for 211, I'll note next year is the 50th anniversary of 211 in Connecticut, which is really a milestone. So what do you want folks to know today?
So a couple of things. 211 in last year handled 1.7 million inquiries last year. And we're also experiencing a 300% increase on the inquiries, both phone call and website based. So these are people who are looking for services. They're trying to find out how they can connect the dots for their home. And that increase has been since 2019. And that's even with it taking away all of the COVID connections that we have made. That's strictly just people in need. So we're answering the phone as quickly as we can, but demand is outpacing what we're able to currently do with our funding. The compromise is that 988, which is our crisis lifeline, answers 95% of our calls in less than 8 seconds, which is very good. We definitely lead the country when it comes to that. So if the staffing are able to grow in that capacity, then we're able to answer over 1,700 more calls per week if we were able to move up the staff that answer the lines that most of our Alice families are looking for.
Well, thanks for all that, Cheryl. And everybody here, Cheryl will be in the background. If you have specific questions, she always has very specific and expert answers. So thanks so much, Cheryl.
Thanks.
Next up, we're going to cover our number one priority this year, which was to establish a permanent and refundable child tax credit. And I'm so glad that Tanisha from She Leads Justice is here to walk us through that. And I have to first start, everybody who saw her in the Capitol knows that Tanisha is a new mom. So congratulations. And you've been so involved in this campaign this year. And I know it hits close to home. So I'm just really curious to get started. What would it feel like for you as a new parent to have a $600 child tax credit right now?
Hi. Yes. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Daniel. And of course, she's going to start crying as soon as I start talking. But I am a new parent. And I will say that things got real very fast when that happened. And I have a stable job. My partner has a stable job. I have a family. I have a supportive network. But, the costs are really staggering. They're very overwhelming. And it's not, it's diapers, it's formula, it's childcare, but it's so many other million little things besides that as well. And it adds up fast. And it's just the beginning. We know that it's just the beginning. So for the families that we work with at She Leads Justice, most of whom are Alice households or families living within or below the poverty line, a refundable child tax credit would make a real immediate difference to them. It's a significant, if we can get a meaningful amount of money, it's groceries for the week, it's clothes for their children for the school year, it's being able to fill up their gas tank when they need to, pay a bill if they need to without panicking. Yeah, so we're really excited to keep going forward with this policy.
Absolutely, we will. And we'll give us a little bit of an update, Tanisha, of what happened in the Capitol this year. We didn't get a refundable child tax credit, but we're very grateful and excited that families with children who qualify for the earned income tax credit are going to get an additional $250, which is huge and a significant step forward, but it's definitely not going to reach everybody. So explain a little bit more about that.
Yeah, of course. So we were really, really proud to be part of this coalition. And we had 5 separate proposals brought forward for a child tax credit, and over 100 lawmakers, 100 lawmakers, Democrats and Republicans, were both signed on to co-sponsor them, which is really exciting because it's not a partisan issue and it doesn't need to be. A version that aligned with what we wanted as a coalition got passed out of the Finance Committee, and it was actually in an early version of the budget draft. And I think what that tells us is that this isn't a radical idea. It's mainstream, it has public support, it has a broad-based support in the legislature. And I think it's just important to note that it's a common sense policy. And the families in the state want it, and it reflects the reality in the state that is families really need help to be able to not struggle and to keep up with costs.
Yeah, excellent. No, well said. And again, I agree with you totally, right? It couldn't have been it's a little disappointing at the very end to not get there, but we are looking at the finish line when it comes to the child tax credit being an unavoidable policy. And so we're really excited to keep working with y'all at She Leads Justice and the 60+ organizations that are part of that coalition to keep that going and get it over the finish line next year.
Yeah.
And thanks so much, Tanisha, for you and your family for being a big part of it.
Oh yeah, she was with me all the time. Thank you guys.
Well, Lisa, that's the recap of our top 2 priority areas, but glad to pass the mic over to you and our esteemed panelists to, as you said, zoom out a little bit and make sure that everybody here really understands all of the wins from this legislative session, as well as, perhaps what's coming ahead when it comes to the ripple effect of the federal issues that are coming soon.
Terrific. Thank you, Daniel. And thanks to everyone who worked so hard with us throughout the legislative session to move those priorities ahead. Please know you'll be hearing more from us as we work to develop a new Alice agenda. You can rest assured that 211 will be in there and that a child tax credit will be in there as well. But please stay tuned for more on that as we head into the fall. We know that the number of Alice households is growing. That's not the direction that we want things to go in Connecticut. So there's work to be done. As a quick recap, in 2025, we had the long session of our 2-year cycle where we see our legislators and the governor work together to draft the 2-year state budget. Altogether, there was a giant flurry of work, 3,855 pieces of legislation, 940 of which made it out of the committee process, and 203 of which made it to the governor's desk. So a lot of movement in a lot of areas. But what we want to know is what really affects Alice families. Of all that work, what do we see at the state level and at the federal level that we want our friends and colleagues here to know in terms of what really impacts our Alice households across the state. And to help unpack this set of questions, we have some terrific guests with us today. Meryl Gay, the Executive Director of the Early Childhood Alliance, Jason Jakubowski, the President and CEO of Connecticut Food Share, and Hugh Bailey, Policy Director for the Open Communities Alliance. So what we want to ask is what happened for Alice families in this last session? What good things passed? What's left unfinished? And what should we pay attention to moving forward, particularly with the federal budget pending? What do you see on the horizon that we need to be thinking about, as we know that Connecticut is planning for a special session in September to try and respond to whatever it is that happens at the federal level? And we'd also like to ask each one of you, as seasoned advocates with great successes behind you and a lot of work that you're always doing, why does it matter? Why does advocacy matter? And why should people get involved and stay involved? So that's a lot of questions, but you are all pros. And I'm going to turn it over first to Meryl Gay.
So when you look at the Alice budget, one of the biggest items is childcare. If you have 2 children and you're paying market rate for childcare, you're probably paying more for that than you are for housing, which is saying something in an expensive state like this. So this year, the governor proposed a universal pre-K endowment, which the legislature modified to turn into an early childhood endowment, where 35% of the new seats that will be created over time will be infant toddler seats, not just preschool slots. So this is probably the biggest thing to happen in my 20 years of advocacy. We have finally created a way to fund early childhood outside of the spending cap and to use that to grow a fund that will supply this ongoing without having to compete every year against every other great cause in the world. So this year, we're putting somewhere between $220 and $300 million into the endowment. And then each year afterwards, the entire unappropriated surplus is supposed to go into that endowment. Had we been doing this the last several years, there'd be a couple $1 billion there already. What this will do is strengthen the state's early start system, which is the combination of the old school readiness programs and the child development centers. In the first stage, what it does is really strengthen those by providing them with more funding so that they can raise wages for staff and reduce the costs to families. So no family would pay more than 7% of their income, and families under $100,000 would pay nothing. And then as the fund grows and we're able to support an expansion of slots, that would happen through a system that prioritizes places where there's not care and places where there's a high level of social vulnerability. And it's all about building a quality system where there are well-trained, well-paid teachers, and families are able to get truly affordable care. So that was the big bill, and then there was a complementary bill that also dealt with that endowment. One of the things it did was put in healthcare subsidy for early educators, because a lot of people don't understand early educators. 97% of other professions pay more than early educators. Many of them are working for minimum wage without health insurance. And so this is really about trying to, how do we lift up that industry and at least provide them with healthcare? And then there was also some money for bonding to do facilities improvements, because we have a lot of programs that have no savings if the furnace goes out or a water heater breaks and they've got a flood. They don't have any reserves to pay for that. And because this has just been such a bare bones operation for so long. So those are all great things. It's going to take a while for there to be enough money in the fund to be able to start making really noticeable differences in the childcare scene, probably a couple of years. But we're on track to do good stuff.
Mel, thank you. And is there anything at the federal level that is on the horizon and concerns you?
Yeah, all sorts of stuff. Um, I'll let others talk about the details of the impacts of SNAP and Husky, but the big picture is the state's going to have a big hole in its budget because of those cuts, and we're going to have to decide: are we going to let people fall off of healthcare, or are we going to fill the gap? And that's going to mean that we will probably not have a big surplus that can then get deposited into the early childhood endowment. So that's one of the concerns about how we funded this. I mean, in New Mexico, they did it with oil and gas revenue. We don't have oil and gas revenue, but we have had a surplus. So that was Connecticut's approach for how to fund a trust fund.
Right, right. So if the federal changes mean that the state of Connecticut has to absorb additional costs, it could delay the state's ability to pursue the expansion of early care options for our residents.
Yeah. And then we're still, watching closely to make sure that Head Start doesn't get cut, child care development block grants, those sorts of things.
And Meryl, there was some relatively good news. Head Start had seemed under threat, and then that reversed itself, at least for the moment. Is that right?
For the moment, yes, for the moment.
Great. Meryl, I know you have another meeting that you're supposed to be at right now. We really appreciate your time, and that step forward on childcare is a big win. It's a big win. But what would you say to that last question about advocacy, why it matters, and why we ask of the people on this webinar to stay engaged and keep putting their shoulder to the wheel?
Well, there are lots of things that can be done through local volunteer efforts, and then there are big things that you can't fix with that. And that's where we need advocacy to change the system. Early childhood has always been plagued with a lack of money. You can't expect parents who are at their lowest net worth in the 5 years after having the birth of their first child to be able to bear a cost that is, the equivalent of their rent. It just doesn't work, and it never has worked. The only way we can fix that is with government money going into the mix. So that took lots of advocacy. It took a lot of years of doing it, but it took persuading key leaders that this was something that needed to happen. You're muted,
Thank
Lisa.
you, Meryl. Thank you. Your good work for so many years is in no small part what helped get us here. So thank you. Jason, I'd like to turn to you to give us a picture of what happened at the state level and what might be on the horizon at the federal level with regard to food security.
Well, it's like a good news, bad news type of thing there. So, look, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts at both the state and federal levels of government. I could say this year, and first of all, let me just say this, Lisa. Everything that's been talked about thus far, the additional funding for the earned income tax credit, what Merrill's work with early childhood. I mean, these are all things that ultimately will contribute to lowering the hunger rate here in a state like Connecticut. The problem with hunger, especially in a wealthy state like Connecticut, is that how it arises is because people have to make choices. Do they pay for their heat? Do they pay for electricity? Do they pay for medicine, or do they pay for food? And almost always they sit there and say, sorry, I can go without a meal, or my kid can go without a meal. And that's not a choice we ever want anybody to have to make here in the state of Connecticut in the year 2025. So all of those things are certainly helpful. We had a very big win this year in terms of the Connecticut Nutrition Assistance Program. The CTNAP program was created as a bipartisan program created by Governor Rell and a Democratic legislature about 20 years ago. It had been funded at $900,000 for every year since then. The funding is earmarked in state law. It can only be used by Connecticut Food Share to purchase food specifically for local pantries. We have over 600 local pantries, and the CTNAP funding goes to helping us purchase food for those local pantries. We can't use it for overhead. We can't. There's no percentage off of the top. They can't use it for diesel fuel. Can't use it for salaries or benefits. Only buying food for local pantries. And we were very happy that the governor, in his budget, proposed an increase. Even happier that the legislature approved a significant increase. We went from $900,000 a year to $3 million in year one of the budget and $6 million in year two of the budget. Not as much as we asked for, but a significant improvement over where we've been for the last 20 years. The best thing about it is it was a bipartisan effort. We really are one of the, look, we live in a world in which Democrats and Republicans don't necessarily agree on a lot of different things, but we were able to form a coalition of people who recognize that, hey, hunger is in their backyard. It's not just the cities. It's not just affluent suburbs. It's also the small rural towns. And we were able to have Representative Kavros DeGraw and Senator Eric Berthel, two people who admittedly don't agree on a whole heck of a lot, come together and be our champions. So we were very pleased with that, and it was necessary, and it was very helpful at a very critical time. To the second, which transitions to the second part of your question, which is, how does it relate to what's going on at the federal government? Look, these are about as difficult. These are the hardest times I've had in my 8 years at Connecticut Food Share, and that includes during the pandemic. One thing. During the pandemic, we have to remember is that the federal government did step up and provided a lot, like millions and millions of pounds of free food that we distributed at Rentschler Field and at locations all across the state of Connecticut. Right now, we're in a situation where the opposite is happening. You've got 516,000 people in Connecticut who are food insecure. That's an 11% increase over last year. And the federal government is actually moving in the other direction. This year already, we've had 35 trailer loads of food that were supposed to be coming here to Connecticut Food Share were canceled by the federal government. That's the equivalent of about $1.7 million. We don't have an extra $1.7 million hanging around, unfortunately, to be able to make up that gap. We lost $1 million in the local farm to LFPA, what we call our Farm to Neighbors program, that was discontinued by the current administration. And then when you look at the cuts that are on the horizon, they are just horrific for working families and for Alice families, not just here in Connecticut, but across the country. I have the sometimes I always say I don't know if I won or lost a bet, but I chair Feeding America's National Policy Committee, and this is a heck of a time for that to be happening, because the cuts that we're looking at in terms of SNAP and in terms of Medicaid would be absolutely devastating to working families all across this country. For every meal that we provide at the food bank, SNAP provides 9. It's the first line of defense against hunger. And if the federal government were to make the cuts they're talking about to SNAP, it could potentially triple our lines overnight. Add to it the fact that many of the families that we serve also rely on Medicaid. If you make major cuts to Medicaid, it's going to increase our lines. And while we're very appreciative to the state legislature and to the governor for increasing our appropriation for the CTNAP program, all the food that all of that money can buy isn't going to be able to fill the gaping hole left by the cuts to SNAP and to Medicaid. So to say that we're nervous would be an understatement. I think we're scared. And it's not just coming from us at Connecticut Food Share. I'd say that's Feeding America and every food bank across the country.
Thank you, Jason. It's a tough picture, but it's important that we all share an understanding of what could be coming at us. And I do just want to say, what is inspiring about what you've said is that there is additional money coming to Food Share. And what we also know, Jason, is that a dollar to Food Share is different than me going out and spending $1, buying some things at the grocery store and donating that. How is it different?
I could put you in a commercial, Lisa. You tee that up pretty nicely. But I mean, it is true. And again, it's not just for Connecticut Food Share; it's for every food bank in the country because we are purchasing in bulk. So if you took $1, you went to the grocery store, you could buy a can of soup. If you gave us $1, we could buy 20 cans of soup with that dollar because we are buying by the truckload. So we always say that if you're feeling generous and you want to collect cans of food, you could always donate those to your local food pantry. If you want to donate funds, you're always better off donating those to your local food bank because we're able to purchase in bulk. So it's going to be a difficult road ahead, I think, for all of us. But we appreciate our partnership with you and with the United Way of Connecticut. And I will tell you, most of our referrals come from 211, where we couldn't live without it. So very happy for you that we're still up and running.
Well, thank you, Jason. Your work is so important. There's very little that's more basic than being able to put food on the table. We've got to take care of those basic needs. And I think the good news is that we are all together in this and we're focusing on it as a
Yep.
team. So thank you for being part of the team. And Jason, stay
Absolutely.
with us if you can.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm good. I'm good.
Good. We appreciate you being here.
I'm in my
And
car. The air conditioning's on, so I'm not sweltering in here.
good, good in this hot weather. Hugh Bailey from Open Communities Alliance. Hugh, talk with us about housing. What happened? Where are we at the state level? And then add any comments about what you're seeing at the federal level.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me. This was a really interesting session. Housing has been a very tough issue in Hartford for years. It's been growing year by year. I think the momentum to doing something has been increasing year by year as we see how the market is stuck and how we're really just not doing much of anything for people who are struggling with their housing needs. And so I don't want to make it sound like everything was great this year. We did have some disappointments. Just cause eviction is a cause that's very important to a lot of people. What that would mean is that landlords would need to have a reason basically to evict someone from their rental unit. Right now they can do, they can at the end of a lease, if a person has their lease up, they can be evicted without any reason. And what just cause eviction would do would say you can still evict people for cause, not paying your rent or, damage, things like that, but you couldn't evict them without a good reason. So that's been a cause that has been growing year by year. It did not pass this year. That was a big disappointment. But in general, we got more done on housing this year than we have in a very long time. Again, there's a caveat because that there was a huge omnibus housing bill called HB 5002, which is currently on the governor's desk. And just as I was on this webinar, I just saw a new quote from the governor, and he is hemming and hawing and we really do not know where he's going on this. So if I can just take 1 minute to say, if anybody's watching this and wants to contact the governor and say, please sign HB 5002, this is really important to so many people. He's hearing from a lot of people that want him to veto it. This is the first time that Hartford has made a meaningful move on housing in a long time. It would be a huge setback and disappointment if he were to veto this bill. Just a quick note on what it includes. It includes all kinds of things. There are different measures on zoning, on density, on promoting transit-oriented development. There is something from the governor's own staff that would, reward towns for allowing increased density on certain parts of their land. The governor was involved in the negotiations, so certainly we would hope that would play into the decision making. At OCA, we have been promoting this bill called Towns Take the Lead. And what it does is it really asks every town in the state to plan and zone for their share of affordable housing. 2 years ago, we got past a study. The state procured a study that looked at the need for affordable housing. What is the number? What is the goal that we should be aiming towards? And then allocated those numbers out to the towns. And so that each town knows what it has to plan for. And so what Towns Take the Lead does is it asks every town to plan and then crucially zone for that housing to be built. They don't have to build it themselves. This is not public housing. This is not something that, towns need to take on as an expense of their own. They need to allow it to be built. And that's really what's not happening right now. The zoning is so restrictive in Connecticut. Our market is so constrained in so many different ways. There are a lot of things that go into a lack of housing. We can't do anything about interest rates. We can't do anything about the price of lumber, tariffs, all these other things we can't do anything about. We can do something about zoning. And it doesn't even have to be expensive. You can change zoning laws right now without a major expense, and you can have a major impact on so many people in need. The need for affordable housing just keeps growing and growing. So Towns Take the Lead is included in HB 5002, and we are really very much hoping that the governor will sign it and allow it to take effect and let us get some sort of movement on this issue that has been stuck so long in Connecticut.
Thank you, Hugh.
Lisa, one thing,
think
I just want to highlight something that Hugh had said, or to accent it. At our lines, you go to a food line in Connecticut, there are two things you hear over and over again. One is the price of groceries, obviously, but the second is the need for the affordability and availability of housing. It is hands down, again, other than the price of groceries, which we all deal with, it is the number one thing that we hear in any town, whether it's a city, whether it's a small town, whether it's an affluent suburb. That's what we're hearing all across the state, that the state does need to do some more. So
Thank you, Jason. And that's a great reminder that all of these things are connected. As you said, if you have to pay your rent, then some of that money is going to come out of your food. If you can't pay for your food, then you're not going to be able to pay for childcare. If you have to feed your family, it's all connected for these families who are struggling. And we know, Hugh, that Connecticut is consistently one of the worst markets in the country in terms of availability of housing. And as you said, we know that it has a lot to do with zoning. Texas, not a state that you necessarily think of as friendly to the most vulnerable, has lower rates of homelessness than we do, in no small part because they don't have the type of zoning restrictions that we have that have constrained the growth of housing. So thank you for your hard work on that. And thank you to Hugh. You answered the question about why advocacy matters by reminding folks here with us that the governor is hearing from people who do not want the changes that that bill includes. And it's so important for him to hear from people who do believe in the change that that bill could create in Connecticut. And similarly, Jason, important that he hears from people about how very critical it is for the state of Connecticut to invest in programs that work to support our families, to support our farmers, and to make nutritious food available. So Daniel, I know we want to save some time for questions, including questions to our terrific panelists. What are we seeing come in?
I think, gentlemen and Lisa, you've been crystal clear. But I'll get it started because I have been holding one since we watched that video. I'm in the hallways with y'all many days up at the Capitol, and I'd be curious to know if there's like an interaction or more of a story, right? This is a lot of data. We love data, but I think also if there's a little story that you might share very briefly about, the impact of your work this session or somebody you met. Like for me, Babs, who was the grandparent who's raising a child in that video, she has just been such a joy to work with, and she's exactly, regrettably, the kind of household with children that does not qualify for the earned income tax credit boost that was approved. And there's so many different family types, and she was always just such a strong champion for leaning into that idea, right? Whether you've got foster children or you're raising your grandchildren as dependents or whatever the configuration of your life might be. Maybe you're 19 and you're a young person who's disconnected and you're raising a child. There's so many different family types, and she was just such a great champion for that this year. So are there little nuggets like that you might want to share to help keep us motivated?
I mean, one thing that I can share that, just in general terms, I think a lot of people think of housing as something that if you have it, it's not as much of a concern. And there are plenty of people in Connecticut who live in a single family home and have been there a long time, and maybe it's not top of mind for them. And so you can think that, well, this doesn't affect them. To that, I always say, well, do they have kids? Because eventually those kids are going to grow up and they're going to want a place to live. And the number one thing that resonates with so many people in a place like Connecticut is, do you want your kids to have to move to another state? Because that's the situation that we're going to be in. Um, when kids graduate high school, they graduate college, they don't want to live with their parents anymore. They want to get out on their own, and you might love your kids, but you know it's time for them to go out on their own. And when you're in a situation like we have in Connecticut, it's just not possible. So we just lose so many people. We have so many colleges and universities in this state, and we lose so many graduates because there just aren't options for people. So it's just one of those things that no matter what community we're in, no matter who we're talking to, that really resonates because everybody's family goes through that at some level. Older people, when they downsize, you don't want a 4-bedroom house with a giant lawn anymore. And you don't want to leave your community. You want to stay where you are. You don't want to give up all of your connections. If there's no place to move in your community, you're stuck. And it's just when you have a market that's just not reacting to what people need, that's not reacting to changing circumstances, it doesn't serve anybody. And that's where we are right now.
Hugh, my daughter just graduated UConn, and now you're making me worry she's gonna like go out to like Idaho or Wyoming or something like that. But what you're saying is absolutely true because she's sitting there like, yeah, I'm living at home. I mean, I've got what are my options in the long run? So I think that's a very good point. I could tell you, I think the highlight or probably the most inspirational part of the session for us, Daniel, was the number of pantries that we were able to get from around the state coming up to the state capitol, actually coming up to Hartford, people that had come up to us and said, hey, I'm new at this. I've never done this before. I don't know how to testify in front of a committee. I've never written a letter to the governor before. I've never talked to the Speaker of the House before. But really trying to localize it for all 187 legislators, and I think that was one of the advantages that we have is that there's one of our food pantries in every district in Connecticut, and I think when you get that local piece, that's when people like start nodding their head like, oh, wait a second, I get this. This is in my backyard as well. Yeah, I mentioned Lenny Cavros DeGraw, a Representative DeGraw from Avon. She represents a relatively affluent community. But there's she volunteers at our mobile truck every other week, and there's 200 people in line there. So when people recognize that, oh wait, this is my backyard too, I think that's really the piece that resonates with a lot of legislators.
That's right, Jason. You're so right to point out you can't tell who is struggling and who isn't by appearances. You just can't. And we know that with 40%, actually 42% of households with children in Connecticut are Alice or below. 42%. So for all of us, these are people we know and they're people we don't know, and they are in every zip code and every town and every city. So it's that much more critical that we keep our eye on the ball of what we can move forward. And what we do know is that there are these great models. And Jason, thank you for lifting up the creativity of our friends in New Mexico who did find a way to resource. I'm sorry, not for your Jason, but for Merrill. In New Mexico, finding a way to resource child care and making it more affordable. There are these creative steps that we have seen that work in other states. And we have every reason in Connecticut to know that we can do more, even with the turbulence that we're going to feel from the federal decisions. What else do we have in the way of questions, Danielle?
Oh, I want to add one of my favorite stories of Lisa in the Capitol this year, since you thought you didn't have to answer my question. But there was a bill about 211 that was that actually Senator Ciccarella put in, and Jason, you spoke on it. It was fantastic, and it was actually submitted by a graduate student at UConn, and he came to the Capitol that day of the hearing. And Lisa, you just spent so much time with him in the Capitol, just engaging with him, connecting with him, sharing your thoughts and ideas. And I mean, I think it's just sometimes that's when those real relationship moments and interactions happen. And I think he was psyched to be there and testify in support of this bill that he helped kind of suggest as part of his graduate project. And that's just civics more than alive and well, or democracy more than alive and well in our state, which bears underscoring.
Well, Daniel, that's a great moment. And we were so lucky to have that incredibly energetic and excited student who had learned about 2-in-1 and wanted to find a way to help. And what is terrific is that every single person on this webinar with us today has the ability to reach at least one other person and talk with them about how important advocacy is and to give them some tips on how to do it. And we're going to double down for our part with our United Way partners to help provide tools and training to explain to people in this next session what's going on and how to get involved and to make it easy for them. What we know is that for all of us, we're busy, we're working a day job, we're trying to keep our own households running. We respect people's time and we want to make it easy for people to engage in advocacy. So we ask all of you to work with us so that we can reach people who may not have advocated before and help them to raise their voices.
And I think with that, I'm going to start the thank yous. So thank you, Jason. Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, Cheryl and Tanisha as well. And of course, to your point, Lisa, to the thousands of folks through all our different organizations who engaged in some kind of, whether it was writing one email or making one phone call or forwarding even, some information along to folks. I think everybody has a role to play working together to make our state policies more supportive of families living under the ALICE threshold. And I did want to add one little plug. You kind of are on the plug with me, Lisa. It's very clear in the work I do and in the data actually that it's easier to do this advocacy work if you join a coalition. It's a team effort. It's not something you need to feel like you need to do. I like to say it's like 10 minutes a week, maybe, that you would need to dedicate to doing a little bit of the state advocacy and federal advocacy work. It helps you share the load and it helps you lift everybody up at exactly the right time to do the thing you need to do. And I think that's how we got some great wins this year for sure. Passing it you, Lisa, for the final words.
I just want to thank everybody who kindly made the time to be here with us today. And thanks to all of you. If you're a direct service provider, please know we appreciate you. Your job is hard and it's important, and we see you and we appreciate you. If you are a citizen advocate and worked with us to place calls, send emails, to raise your voice, we appreciate you. To the other advocates who joined us today and others who might be also in this webinar, thank you for your efforts to help mount these advocacy efforts that are so very needed to lift up policies that can work to support ALICE households. It helps me in these challenging times we're living in to be in community with folks who are working together as we are to move things the right direction. We don't always win. We don't get everything in one go. As Meryl said, decades of advocacy were needed to get to where we are in childcare, but we got here. So I'm hoping we can all stay in community together, working and pulling things the right direction next session too. So thank you to all of you, and thanks for your time today.